morning. Welcome to Adaptive Chicago Productions. I'm Ken Borst, your host. You know, trials and tribulations of many different kinds are often visited upon the lives of persons with disabilities. Here to talk about that issue such as that is my guest, Debbie Pittman. Debbie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ken.
Debbie, start out by telling us what happened to you.
Well, this involved a court situation in which I went through a divorce, and at one point I was not represented by attorney, and I asked for an accommodation. And I asked for the accommodation because I learned that the attorney from the other side was taking advantage of my disability and was altering the orders. We'd go before the judge and they'd write down something else. So I asked for an accommodation of a court reporter so that there would be a record.
What was the judge's name?
The judge's name on the case was Andrea Slifer. Now, when I asked for the accommodation, I had to ask for that accommodation through the disability coordinator, so I didn't deal with the judge for the accommodation.
Okay. What was the accommodation request you made?
I asked for a court reporter so that there would be a record of what the judge was saying in the case.
Why do you feel it was necessary for you to make that accommodation request?
Because the attorney was altering the orders and writing down something different from what the judge had said.
After you made your request, what happened?
I made my request through the disability coordinator, and the disability coordinator, I asked her to go to someone independent that could make the decision of the court reporter, somebody independent from the case. And instead of doing that, she went to the judge hearing the case, and the judge said no. And then the disability coordinator then went to the chief judge, and he granted the accommodation of the court reporter.
What was the procedure you used in making your accommodation request?
I had to write a letter to and submit that letter to the disability coordinator.
What happened after you made your request?
The disability coordinator went to the judge hearing the case instead of going to the chief judge independently.
Do you feel the treatment you received was related to your accommodation request?
Yes, I do.
Why?
Because there were remarks made in relation to me having made the request. And even though I didn't make the request directly through the judge, by the disability coordinator going over the judge's head when she made a decision, then I was basically retaliated against. For example, there were things that I should have gotten that I did not get.
Give some examples of how you feel your accommodation request being granted by the chief judge resulted in your being retaliated against.
Okay, for example, I had requested an order of protection because of some issues that were going on. There was no contact order in place, and even though I submitted 12 pages of voicemail messages to show that this contact was still going on, I was told I didn't have enough evidence for an order of protection.
Wow, 12 pages of voicemails, that's a lot of proof.
Yeah.
Did you yourself ask the chief judge to grant your accommodation request?
No. I only found out that it went to the chief judge after the fact. It was all done through the disability coordinator.
You said you requested that the disability coordinator go to someone independent from the case. Why did you do that?
Because I knew that if she went to the judges hearing the case, that they might feel that this court reporter was for the purpose of monitoring them, when it was not. It was to keep the attorney honest.
You're not the only one that has had problems with this judge. Is that right?
From my understanding, yes. This judge was listed in the Arlington Heights newspaper, from my understanding, as one of the judges not to be recommended as one of the judges not to be voted back in.
What eventually happened in relation to how your case went?
What eventually happened is finances that should have been counted as non-marital finances were not. Income that should have been counted as part of the equation was not. Eventually, even though I was awarded the property, it ended up where the property ended up being taken from me through a falsified document.
Did you file an appeal?
Yes, I did.
Did you do anything before filing for an appeal?
Yes, before filing for an appeal, I did request an investigation, because at one point I was ordered not to spend any money. And I felt like there was something wrong with that order, because how can you order somebody not to spend money?
Yeah, that is kind of strange. What happened with your appeal?
The appeal came to the decision that I had not filed my notice of appeal timely, even though basically I had filed it ahead of time. And there is a statute in the regulation that says if it's filed ahead of time, it's counted as being filed on the last day of the final decision. The appeal also said that the decisions were not final, when in actuality they were. And they did reflect that the property was awarded to me.
While the appeal process was going on, what happened to you in circuit court?
My ex, with his attorney's help, got another judge. Eventually the judge was removed from the case, Judge Schleifer, which I am guessing had to do with the investigation that I requested through Judge Evans. And the court reporter that started this whole process is no longer there. I suspect that had a part to do with the investigation. Since then, a judicial deed was written saying that the property was awarded to my ex and that I was supposed to have turned it over to him. And though I have submitted documentation to the judge that wrote this judicial deed to show her that no, this is not what the divorce said, she did not examine my evidence, even though my document was a certified document. And the appellate court's decision, which came out this year, and she was told it came out last year, reflects that the property had been awarded to me.
So even though you had filed an appeal on the decisions made in circuit court, you still had to go back and forth in circuit court for the same deed?
For the same property, yes. As though I had not filed an appeal. So it was like, even though the appeal was supposed to be in place, and there's a case, Kelly versus Oracle from 2015, that states once an appeal has been filed on the case, that all the proceedings are stayed in the circuit court. That didn't happen in my case.
How long was your case in the appellate court?
For 3 years, and technically is still a piece of it there.
When did the appellate court make their decision?
June 28th, 2019.
What happened to your property in the meantime?
Through this judicial deed that my ex's attorney got a judge to write last year, the property was taken from me because they submitted a document when I was not there and my attorney was not there. We didn't know anything about it. They submitted a document, went into court and submitted a document which said that I was to turn over the property to him in 120 days.
So you mean to tell me an attorney signed an affidavit saying he had no knowledge of an appeal in relation to the property, and he had filed documents in the appellate court on the appeal?
Yes. With that deed is an affidavit that says he had no knowledge of an appeal in relation to the property.
What was the attorney's name?
Van A. Schwab.
Is there anything that can be done to this attorney?
That's a very good question. I have spoken to the state's attorney's office, and the state's attorney's office has said that if there's a document that has been signed by a judge and that document has been altered in any form or fashion, it's considered forgery, and that the FBI should be involved. And when I spoke to the FBI, they did not seem like they wanted to deal with it.
Who all have you talked to try to get this issue with the property corrected?
I have talked to the FBI. I have talked to the state's attorney's office. I have talked to the attorney general's office. I have talked to a ton of attorneys.
What did the state's attorney's office tell you?
That this is a federal offense and that it should be investigated by the FBI, since it involved the forgery of a judge's signature.
Did you ever go back to the judge who wrote the judicial deed?
Yes, I did. And she did not examine my documentation. She would not touch it. She behaved as though my condition was contagious.
What was her response to you?
She told me that she didn't believe it.
What do you hope to get out of this?
What I hope to get out of this is to bring out the unscrupulous behavior of an officer of the court, which needs to be addressed, in addition to the fact that when a person with a disability goes into court and has to request an accommodation, they should not be retaliated against because of them having made that request and the chief judge having to overrule another judge.
Well, I've received the 5-minute warning, but I haven't received the wrap-up warning yet. So I have a couple of questions that I sort of unceremoniously added to the list you'd already given me. One is, if a woman with a disability is getting married for the first time and she seeks your advice, what would you tell her?
Well, I would tell her, first of all, to make sure that the person that she is marrying is sincere about the relationship. Because people go into marriages for different reasons.
Yes. And if such a woman is married and she's considering a divorce, what advice would you give her should she seek your advice?
I would say that if that is what she has to do to take that step to get a divorce, then she needs to make sure that she, number one, has a good attorney, and she needs to really do good research to make a determination as to who will be considered a reputable attorney and that knows what they're doing and that will fight for her.
Yes, this is really an amazing story with a lot of stuff going on and certainly way too many players. And on that note, I want to thank Debbie Pittman as my guest for the Adaptive Chicago Productions show. And with Adaptive Chicago Productions, this is Ken Borst, and have a good day.